Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. First of all, I just want to thank you for being here. This is episode 4 of this type of content that I'm putting out on YouTube, in which it's longer format. No, I am not planning on sliding into these videos, guys. I just don't feel like it matches with the tone of, sitting down and talking about specific topics. Today's topic, let's get into it. This is an interesting one. I feel like a lot of men want to talk about this. I have personally had advice requests sent from a handful of men that say that they are in this situation or they are in a somewhat similar situation, and that is a sexless marriage, or we could say a sexless relationship. I do think that it happens more frequently in marriages versus just general long-term relationships, but I don't have the stats on that. What I do have the stats on, though, are for married couples. And what they are showing now, there was a recent study that showed that 15% of married couples are in a sexless marriage. Now, 15% actually, when I first read that, didn't sound as bad as I thought that it may have been. But they define this as not having sex in the past 6 months to a year. And the numbers change based on age. So for a younger adult, so a 20-year-old, it's way lower. It's only 3.5% of marriages that are sexless. And then as it gets older, though, so for 30-year-olds, it's 6.5%. And then for 40-year-olds, I feel like, this is more than double, right? From 30 to 40, we see an increase from that 6.5% to 15.6%. It's quite a jump. And then by age 50, the next decade, it's at 23.9%. So I think that even though when we hear the average is only 15%, I think the situations in which we are hearing about this happening, it typically is after marriage has occurred for a few years to like a decade. And of course, you're going to be older at that point. So the numbers are really showing what's going on in those later ages. So I do think that in general terms, when we have this fear of being in a sexless marriage, it is happening more frequently in the age that we would assume that that would be happening anyways. Let's go through the most common reasons why sexless marriages happen. 1, sexual desire mismatch. 2, frequent marital conflict. 3, there's been a break in trust and other relationship issues that are not minor. 4, erectile dysfunction. 5, a lack of spice in the relationship. 6, there's been cheating. 7, there's been abuse. 8 is the refusal to talk about the lack of sex. 9 is a loss of sexual interest. And 10, mental health issues. So those are the reasons. And the reason why I'm putting this up there when I say reasons is because these are road bumps, right? That any relationship could be approaching one of those. And I would say that any relationship is eventually going to hit at least one of those. So it is really how you work with your partner together to resolve those issues that is going to indicate whether or not you're going to successfully get to the point where you're both back to a position of meeting each other's needs and you're both, into it again. So there absolutely, right, can be a sexual desire mismatch. But the problem comes about more so, what I've always seen, is when one partner just does not want to work on it. And the other one, might try for a time to try to get the one to work on it. He tries to do it all. He tries to follow the advice that he's getting online of, how to increase your woman's desire, and it's just not working, and he hits a level of frustration, and then he will retract back eventually. And that is where, he'll either kind of sit in his misery, or a marriage could potentially end, and that's when he might consider divorce, or he might unfortunately consider meeting his needs in other ways outside of the marriage, which is the worst thing, guys, that you can do, by the way, for yourself and, of course, for the relationship. And this is something that should really be talked about before you're even considering marriage. And that is where your values stand, hers versus yours. And if you two really talk and you both view having sex and having a healthy sexual relationship and being able to openly talk about it and actually going through your relationship and expressing those things, that is going to indicate that you both highly value that in your relationship. Secondly, you have to just highly value the relationship over many things that will come about as you're living life. This is where I hear of couples that have been together for a long time actually scheduling their times together. And that's a real thing that can work. And the more that you do it will result in you actually desiring it more. But the bottom line is that if you're willing to actually sit there and schedule it, like, it means that you value that in your relationship and you're both valuing it, right? Because you're both agreeing to that time. You've obviously had a discussion about it. So those are really green flags, huge green flags, that even if you're coming up on these issues in a relationship, that you're able to work together to get beyond them. Now, I want to talk about the differences that I have seen from men versus women when it comes to dealing with the issue of a lack of intimacy, a lack of sex. And that is that typically good men will kind of express it in some way, but then he'll kind of just wait it out. And he's like putting the ball in her court and he's waiting it out. But that's not very effective because, again, you're not working as a team to resolve it. And you're kind of just putting it all on her. And that is a lot of pressure to put on anyone. And she may really almost resent you for it. And that's not going to help with the issue. Now, what I see women doing is they will oftentimes not really get to the heart of the issue. And they will actually like sacrifice what they desire. And they will go like one way or the other. They will either go to 0 times and it's a dry desert out there, or they will just kind of give in to a limited amount that they think that as much as they feel like he needs in order to keep him happy. But you're not really having a discussion about desire. Like, the amounts of times that she's doing it is not actually times when she's desiring it. And she's almost creating this dynamic that ends up into a really negative feedback loop in which she's having sex, but she's not enjoying it. And then she's going to want it less and less and less. And it's because of that lack of communication about intimacy with her partner. And if she had had that conversation, although it's very vulnerable, it absolutely is. And I think that a lot of women nowadays just have it in their minds that men just, they want this amount. And if you're not meeting his needs, then you're running the risk of this, and that, including him stepping out of the marriage. So a lot of women will just, just put up with it and do, but it's terrible on her own sexual desires. It actually really works against it. I think that all men would agree that they do not want his woman to do that. He wants his woman to really desire it because that is what creates really good intimacy. And what's interesting to me is that I think the stats show that a lot of couples are not talking about this issue enough. And they're not talking about what they both desire as far as frequency. What's interesting is that couple sex frequency nearly cuts in half at the end of the couple's first year of marriage. Now, I don't want to get into blaming men versus women and who usually has the leading issue in this, but only 48% of married women want sex on a regular basis after 4 years of marriage. That's quite a decline. Now, what is average? I think a lot of people question that, right? Because I will say that this is very individualized, very much so. But there has been studies and surveys on it. And one study that I found, they took 26,000 Americans and they reported having sex 54 times a year on average. So, guys, that's approximately once a week. That's the average, at least for America. But let's be clear, these are just averages. So, couples are individualized, right? So, they could not have sex that frequently, but both feel like they are satisfied, and that is fine. There's no problem with that. The issue is when there is a mismatch in desire. But I do think that when desire drops down quickly after being in a relationship together, so let's say, guys, that you've been dating a year, and if sex decreases drastically, that is probably where it's going to stay, if not decline even further in future years. And I think that's one more reason to make sure that you have been together for some time before taking the steps of marriage. The reason why I say that is because everyone is excited at the beginning of a relationship. And the way that new relationships work on the brain is it's highs. There are huge dopamine doses going into your brain, and it will result in a higher desire. But that desire might be falsely high, and you got to kind of let things settle down in the relationship to really see how well you guys match up together. The risks of going on into a relationship long term and not having this issue resolved, if there is a mismatch, somebody's going to feel rejected. There's going to be less openness in the relationship. There's less unity. There's less of a team mentality. There's going to be self-esteem issues. There can be feelings of failure. One or even both partners, even the one with a low desire, can feel like there is a drifting apart in the relationship. There can absolutely be anger and resentment. There can be loneliness. There can be depression and anxiety because of it. And many times we hear of these couples referring to each other as more like roommates more than lovers. Now, of course, libido will ebb and flow through a relationship depending on life circumstances and depending on health and age. And of course, like if you have children. So there might come a time when one partner is not that interested. But it, again, all depends on how open they are about discussing it. Because if you wait months and even years, the bedroom will feel like it becomes weaponized. All that time will do. Time will add this layer of complexity that will make it more challenging to resolve. And that's because of the buildup potentially of resentment. So the sooner that you guys talk about it and that you're really in agreement that this is a true threat to your relationship, the better off you will be. And the better the chances are that it will just be an ebb. You know, that you'll just get through a little bit of time period and then it will get back to normal, or it will be even better. The biggest message I want to send today is that the worst thing that you can do is just sit in misery with this issue. The best thing that you can do is have open communication. I know it's scary. I know that what you might face is a real hard stop on your desires really being a big mismatch. But it is better to find that out and figure out if you can fix things. And if that's not the case, the earlier the better. So guys, I really hope that this was helpful. You know, I think that a lot of times it can be reassuring when you know that you're not the only one going through it, whether it's that you're in a sexless relationship or if you're just not at the frequency that you desire. I think that it's helpful to sometimes look at the averages and, you know, be able to be encouraged to have a real discussion. But my biggest thing too is for you guys to really just learn to take a team approach in this whole issue. I think that when we talk about a topic like this, it can become very heated and it can be like almost like a gender war thing where it's like, the woman never wants it and then the man always wants it. Like, that is not always true. That whole dynamic is not true. And it's not really going to result in a good resolution. And the best way is to see it as more of a relationship issue, not a her versus him issue. And if you can view it kind of outside of yourselves, and then you can really approach it together as a team. I'm going to be really interested to know what you guys think. I am sure the comment section will be very interesting. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Follow me for next week.